This story is very meaningful. Everyone should hear it. Listen to Brian tell the story. My name is David Harper. I'm 45 years old, a carpenter by trade, with hands roughened by years of shaping wood into something useful, something lasting. I've always believed in building things: houses, furniture, families. For 20 years, I poured my heart into raising Emma, my wife Sarah's daughter from a past I wasn't part of. She wasn't my blood, but she was my world. I thought I'd earned my place as her dad. I thought love and time could outweigh biology. I was wrong. The day of her wedding, standing there in my best suit, I watched her walk down the aisle on the arm of Mark Sullivan, her deadbeat biological father who'd never been there for her. Not me. The man who'd bandaged her knees, paid her tuition, held her when she cried. It wasn't just a rejection. It was a gut punch that left me hollow, a moment that shattered everything I'd built. That day, something inside me broke, and I'm still picking up the pieces. It started 20 years ago in a park. I was 25, single, and aimless, just a guy with a toolbox and a beat-up truck. Sarah caught my eye first, tall, with warm brown eyes and a tired smile, holding the hand of a little girl chasing a paper airplane. Emma was 5, all giggles and wild curls, her laughter cutting through the hum of the world like a melody I didn't know I needed. Sarah introduced herself, her voice soft but steady, and told me about Mark right off the bat. "He's not around much," she said, glancing at Emma with a mix of love and worry. "He shows up, makes promises, then disappears." I nodded, not thinking much of it then. I didn't know that day would mark the start of me stepping into a role I'd never planned for. Emma took to me slowly. The first time she called me Daddy, it was an accident, a slip of the tongue after I'd spent an afternoon teaching her to ride a bike. She'd fallen a dozen times, scraped her knees raw, and I'd been there with a rag and a grin, telling her, "You're tougher than you think, kid." When she said it, "Thanks, Daddy," my chest tightened, a lump rising in my throat. I looked at Sarah, who just smiled and shrugged. "She likes you," she said. From then on, I was hooked. I was at every school play, every soccer game, every late-night fever. Mark would breeze in maybe once a year, dropping off a cheap doll or a promise of a beach trip that never happened. Emma's face would light up when he showed, and I'd swallow the sting, telling myself it didn't matter. I was the one who stayed. Years rolled by, and Emma grew into a smart, stubborn young woman. I was proud of her, damn proud. When she got into college, I didn't hesitate to cover most of her tuition, even though it meant dipping into savings I'd set aside for a new workshop. "You're going places, Em," I'd tell her, ruffling her hair like I did when she was little. She'd grin and say, "Couldn't do it without you, Dad." Those words kept me going, even when Mark called out of the blue to say, "Proud of you, kid," without ever pitching in a dime. After her graduation, she hugged me tight, tears in her eyes. "Thank you for everything, Dad," she whispered. I felt 10 feet tall, like every sacrifice had been worth it. Then came the wedding. Emma met Andrew Carter, a banker with a slick smile and a decent job, and they got engaged fast. I was thrilled, maybe too thrilled. I pictured walking her down the aisle, my chest puffed out, the final stamp on 20 years of being her rock. I helped pay for the reception, chipped in for her dress, even offered to build a wooden arch for the ceremony. "You don't have to do all this," Emma said once, laughing as I sketched out plans. "I want to," I told her. "You're my girl." She hugged me, and I didn't think twice about it. The invitation came a week later, and I opened it with a grin, expecting to see my name as the father of the bride. Instead, it was just David Harper on the guest list, no special mention. I frowned, figuring it was a typo. Then Emma called. "Dad, I need to tell you something," she said, her voice hesitant. My stomach twisted, but I kept it light. "What's up, Em?" I asked. She took a breath. "I asked Mark to walk me down the aisle." The words hit like a sledgehammer. I gripped the phone, my knuckles white. "Mark?" I repeated, my voice flat. "Yeah," she said, casual, like she was picking a cake flavor. "He's my real dad, you know? I've always wanted him to do this." Real dad. The phrase echoed in my skull, drowning out the years I'd spent proving otherwise. "I've been there for you, Emma," I managed to say, my throat tight. "Every day. Mark's barely—" She cut me off. "I know, Dad, but there's only one biological father. It's just this one thing." Just this one thing. I hung up, my hands shaking, and sat there in the dark, replaying every moment I'd thought we were a family. The wedding day was torture. I showed up early, my suit pressed, my tie knotted tight. My brother Mike was with me, his jaw clenched as we took our seats. "You don't have to stay for this crap," he muttered, his eyes on Mark stumbling in, reeking of whiskey and wearing a grin like he'd won something. "I'm fine," I lied, forcing a smile. Then the music started, and there she was, Emma, radiant in her white dress, clinging to Mark's arm. He tripped once, and she laughed, steadying him. I stared, my chest caving in, every cheer from the crowd a dagger. Sarah beamed from the front row, clapping like this was perfect. Mike grabbed my shoulder. "Let's go, Dave," he said. "You don't need to see this." But I stayed, rooted, invisible. Afterward, I didn't confront Emma. I couldn't. I slipped out before the reception, drove home, and sat in my workshop, staring at the half-finished arch I'd made for her. Sarah came home later, buzzing with excitement. "Wasn't she beautiful?" she asked, then stopped, seeing my face. "What's wrong?" I looked at her, my voice low. "You didn't think to tell me she picked Mark?" Sarah frowned. "It's her day, David. Mark's her father." "I'm her father," I snapped, louder than I meant to. "I've been there, not him," she sighed, exasperated. "You're overreacting. It's not about you." Not about me. I turned away, the fight draining out of me. That night, I slept on the couch, the silence between us thicker than ever. A week later, Emma called. "Hey, Dad," she said, her tone bright, like nothing had happened. "The honeymoon was amazing, beaches, sunsets, the works. Andrew surprised me with dinner under the stars." I listened, my jaw tight, waiting. "But, we kinda overspent," she added, a laugh in her voice. "Could you help us out? Just this once?" I stared at the phone, the casual way she asked cutting deeper than the wedding. "No, Emma," I said, my voice steady despite the storm inside. "I can't." She paused, shocked. "But you always—" "Ask Mark," I cut in. "He's your real dad, right?" Silence stretched, then a quiet, "I understand," before she hung up. I sat there, my heart pounding, a mix of guilt and relief washing over me. For the first time, I'd said no. Sarah found out that night. "She told me you refused to help," she said, her eyes hard. "They're struggling, David. How could you?" I stood up, my hands clenched. How could I? I gave her everything, Sarah, 20 years, and she threw me away like trash. I'm done being her ATM. Sarah shook her head. "She's our daughter." "No," I said, my voice breaking. "She's your daughter, and Mark's, apparently." She stormed off, and the rift between us grew wider, a cold wall I couldn't breach. Things got messier when Helen Carter, Andrew's mother, showed up at our door a month later. She was a short, wiry woman with a voice like a chainsaw. "My boy's out of a job because of your daughter's spending," she barked, pointing at me. "You raised her. You fix this." I crossed my arms, my patience thin. "I didn't raise her to beg, Helen, and I'm not their bank." Her eyes narrowed. "You'll regret this, Harper. I'll make sure everyone knows what a deadbeat you are." She left, slamming the door, and I stood there fuming, wondering how it had all gone so wrong. Then came Tony Russo. I ran into him at a dive bar a few weeks later, nursing a beer to forget the mess my life had become. Tony was Mark's old buddy, a scruffy guy with a crooked smile and a knack for trouble. He slid into the booth across from me, already half drunk. "Heard about the wedding," he said, smirking. "Tough break, man." I shrugged, not in the mood. Then he leaned in, his voice low. "Mark ain't her dad, you know. Never was." I froze, my beer halfway to my mouth. "What?" Tony chuckled. "Yeah, he's known for years. Just played along to screw with Sarah. And you." My mind raced, anger bubbling up. "Why tell me now?" I asked. He shrugged. "Figured you deserved to know, after all that." I couldn't let it go. The next day, I tracked Mark down at a rundown casino, his usual haunt. The place stank of stale smoke and desperation, neon lights flickering over chipped tables and worn-out carpet. Mark was slouched at a slot machine, a cigarette dangling from his lips, his fingers stained yellow from years of the habit. I stormed over, my blood boiling, and slammed a stack of old photos, Sarah laughing with Emma on her shoulders, Tony grinning in the background, onto the table in front of him. The clatter of the pictures drowned out the jingle of the slots for a moment. "Tell me the truth," I growled, my voice low and tight, barely holding back the rage clawing at my chest. "You're not her father, are you?" Mark looked up, his eyes bleary and bloodshot, a smirk curling his lips like he'd been waiting for this. He took a long drag on his cigarette, blowing smoke in my face before letting out a dry, ugly laugh that grated on my nerves. "So what if I'm not?" he said, leaning back in his chair like he owned the place. "She picked me, didn't she? Not you, Mr. Perfect. Me." My vision went red, and before I could think, my fist flew, connecting with his jaw in a satisfying crack that echoed through the room. His head snapped back, the cigarette falling to the floor, and he stumbled, clutching the slot machine for balance. Blood trickled from his lip, but he just grinned wider, a sick, taunting gleam in his eyes. "You're pathetic, David," he spat, wiping his mouth with the back of his hand. "Always were, running around playing daddy to a kid who never wanted you." I lunged again, ready to wipe that smirk off his face, but two burly security guards grabbed me from behind, their hands like vices on my arms. "Out!" one of them barked, dragging me toward the door as Mark laughed behind me, a sound that followed me like a shadow. They tossed me onto the pavement outside, my knees hitting the ground hard, but I barely felt it. My pulse pounded in my ears, my hands trembling, not from fear but from a raw, wild energy I hadn't felt in years. I'd lost control, and damn if it didn't feel good. Like a weight had finally shifted off my shoulders. As I picked myself up, brushing gravel off my jeans, a voice cut through the haze. "Nice swing, Harper. Didn't know you had it in you." I turned to see a woman leaning against a beat-up Chevy, her arms crossed, a cigarette of her own glowing in the dim light. She was maybe 40, with sharp features and dark hair pulled back tight, a leather jacket slung over her shoulders. I didn't know her, but she looked at me like she knew everything. "Who the hell are you?" I snapped, still catching my breath. She smirked, stepping closer. "Name's Lena. I run the bar across the street. Saw you take a shot at Mark. About time someone did." I squinted at her, wary. "You know him?" She nodded, flicking ash onto the ground. "Oh, I know him. Piece of trash owes me $500 from a tab he never paid. He's been dodging me for months." I wiped sweat off my brow, the adrenaline still buzzing. "Well, he's all yours now," I muttered, turning to walk away. But Lena called after me. "Hey, wait up. You want to really stick it to him? I've got something you might want." I stopped, glancing back. Her eyes glinted with something dangerous, something I couldn't ignore. "What are you talking about?" I asked. She reached into her jacket, pulling out a crumpled envelope. "Found this in the bar a while back. Mark dropped it when he was drunk off his ass. It's a letter, some DNA test he never told anyone about. Proves he's not Emma's dad. Thought you might want to use it." My heart skipped, a cold sweat breaking out on my neck. "Why give it to me?" I said, taking the envelope with shaky hands. Lena shrugged. "I don't like cheats, and you look like you could use a win." I stared at the envelope, the paper worn and stained, my mind racing. This was it. Proof Mark had been lying, proof I could shove in his face, in Emma's face, in Sarah's. But before I could process it, a shadow moved behind me, and I heard a low growl. "You shouldn't have done that, Harper." It was Mark, limping out of the casino, his jaw swollen but his eyes blazing. He wasn't alone. Two guys flanked him, rough types with tattoos snaking up their arms. One cracked his knuckles, the other smirked like he was itching for a fight. Lena stepped back, muttering, "Oh shit," and I realized I'd just stepped into deeper trouble than I'd bargained for. "You think you can just hit me and walk away?" Mark sneered, his voice slurring but sharp. "I've got friends, David. You're nothing." My fists clenched, the envelope still in my hand, but I knew I was outnumbered. "Walk away, Mark," I said, keeping my voice steady. "You've got nothing left to say." He laughed, nodding to his buddies. "Get him." They moved fast. One swung at my face, the other aiming for my gut. I ducked the first punch, but the second caught me hard, knocking the wind out of me. I stumbled back, pain exploding in my ribs, but I swung wild, catching one guy in the nose. Blood sprayed, and he cursed, reeling back. Lena shouted, "Hey, knock it off!" And I heard her running off, probably for help, or to save herself. Mark watched, grinning like a maniac, as the second guy tackled me to the ground. My head hit the pavement, stars bursting in my vision, and I tasted blood. But then tires screeched, and headlights flooded the lot. "David!" It was Mike, my brother, leaping out of his truck with a baseball bat in hand. He didn't hesitate, swinging at the guy pinning me down. The thug yelped, rolling off, and Mike hauled me up, his face furious. "You okay?" he panted. I nodded, spitting blood, my ribs screaming. Mark's buddies backed off, and he glared at us, wiping his mouth. "This ain't over," he snarled, then limped away with his goons trailing behind. Mike steadied me, his grip tight. "What the hell, Dave? You picking fights with Mark now? I held up the envelope, my voice hoarse. He's not her dad, Mike. Tony told me, and this proves it. Mike's eyes widened, then narrowed. Jesus, you're gonna burn everything down with this, you know that? I nodded, a grim smile tugging at my lips. Good, let it burn. We climbed into his truck, the envelope clutched in my hand like a grenade. I didn't know what I'd do with it yet, but it felt like power, like a chance to take back something Mark had stolen from me. Back at my place, Sophie was waiting. She'd been calling more since the wedding, her voice a steady anchor when everything else was sinking. She stood in my workshop, her red hair catching the light, a worried frown on her face. Mike called me, she said, rushing over as I limped in. God, David, what happened? She touched my bruised cheek, her fingers gentle, and I winced, not from pain, but from the warmth in her eyes. Got into it with Mark, I said, dropping onto a stool. Found out he's not Emma's father. Never was. Sophie's jaw dropped, then she shook her head. That bastard. And Emma still chose him? I nodded, the hurt flaring fresh. Yeah, she did. Sophie pulled up a chair, sitting close. You don't deserve this, David. None of it. Her hand found mine, and I didn't pull away. We sat there, the silence heavy but not empty, and I felt something shift, a pull I hadn't let myself acknowledge before. I'm tired, Soph, I admitted, my voice cracking. Tired of giving and getting nothing. She squeezed my hand, her eyes fierce. Then stop. You've got a life to live, not just for them, for you. I looked at her, really looked, and saw someone who saw me, not the guy who fixed everyone else's messes. I leaned in, hesitant, and she met me halfway. Our lips touched, soft at first, then desperate, like we'd both been holding back too long. When we pulled apart, I felt alive, guilty, but alive. The next morning, Sarah confronted me. I'd slept at Sophie's, too raw to face home, and when I walked in, Sarah was waiting, arms crossed, her face a storm. Where were you? She demanded, her voice sharp enough to cut. I set my keys down, meeting her gaze. Out, I said, too tired to lie. Her eyes narrowed, then widened as she put it together. With Sophie? She whispered, like saying it aloud made it real. I nodded, bracing myself. You son of a bitch, she hissed, stepping closer. After everything, you're screwing my best friend? I held my ground, my own anger rising. You checked out first, Sarah. You and Emma both. I was nothing to you. Nothing. She slapped me, her hand trembling, tears spilling down her cheeks. Get out, she said, her voice breaking. Just get out. I grabbed my jacket and left, the door slamming behind me like a gunshot. Word spread fast. Helen Carter called me that afternoon, her voice dripping venom. Heard you're shacking up with some tramp while my son and Emma are drowning. You're disgusting, Harper. I hung up, my patience gone. Then Andrew showed up at my workshop, looking wrecked, his tie loose and his eyes red. David, please, he begged, his voice shaking. We're getting evicted. I lost my job and Emma's a mess. We need help. I leaned against my workbench, crossing my arms. Why me, Andrew? Why not Mark? He blinked, confused. Mark? He's gone. Emma hasn't heard from him in weeks. I laughed, bitter and sharp. Figures. No, Andrew. I'm done bailing you out. He stared, then nodded, defeated, and walked away. That night I sat with Mike and Lena at her bar, the envelope open on the table. The DNA test stared back at us, cold, hard proof in black and white. Mark Sullivan, no genetic match to Emma Harper. My hands shook as I traced the words, a strange mix of triumph and exhaustion settling in my gut. What now? Mike asked, sipping his beer, his voice calm but his eyes sharp. Lena smirked, leaning back in her chair, her leather jacket creaking. Give it to Emma. Let her see who Mark really is. Watch her world fall apart like she did yours. I shook my head, the idea tempting but heavy. She won't believe it. She'll just hate me more, say I faked it to hurt her. Mike clapped my shoulder, his grip firm. Then use it for you, Dave. Let it go. You don't need her to see the truth to know it. I folded the paper back up, tucking it into my pocket, its weight both a burden and a shield. Maybe you're right, I said, my voice low. Maybe it's enough that I know. Lena raised her glass, a wicked grin on her face. To screwing over Mark Sullivan, she toasted, and Mike chuckled, clinking his beer against hers. I joined them, the clink of glass a small rebellion, but my mind was elsewhere. I couldn't stop picturing Emma's face at the wedding, the way she'd laughed with Mark like he was her hero. This test could change that, or it could just deepen the hole between us. I wasn't sure I cared anymore. The next day, I was back at my workshop sanding a cedar plank, the rhythm of the work steadying my nerves. The bruises from the fight ached, a dull throb in my ribs, but I welcomed it, proof I'd fought back for once. Sophie showed up around noon, a paper bag in hand, her smile soft but worried. "Brought you lunch," she said, setting it on the bench. "You look like hell, David." I managed a half grin, wiping sawdust off my hands. "Feel like it too." She stepped closer, her fingers brushing my arm, and I felt that pull again. Warm, real, something I hadn't had in years. "You don't have to keep doing this alone," she said, her voice quiet but firm. "I'm here." I looked into her eyes, green and steady, and nodded. "I know." We ate in silence, just sandwiches and coffee, but it was the most peace I'd felt in weeks. Then my phone buzzed. Sarah. I hesitated, my stomach twisting, but answered. "David," she said, her tone clipped. "Emma's coming over tonight. She wants to talk. You should be here." I gripped the phone, my jaw tight. "Why? So she can ask for more money?" Sarah sighed, impatient. "She's hurting, David. Andrew's job loss, the eviction. It's too much. She needs us." I laughed, short and bitter. "She needs my wallet, you mean? I'm done, Sarah." There was a pause, then her voice turned cold. "If you're not here, don't expect me to keep pretending we're a family." She hung up, and I stared at the phone, anger simmering. Sophie watched me, her brow furrowed. "You okay?" she asked. I shook my head. "They're never going to let me go, are they?" That night I didn't go home. I couldn't face it. Emma's tears, Sarah's guilt trips, the same old cycle. Instead, I stayed at Sophie's, her small apartment a refuge of paint cans and canvases. We talked late, about nothing and everything, and when she kissed me, it wasn't desperate this time. It was sure, like we'd crossed a line we couldn't uncross. I didn't feel guilty anymore. I felt free. But freedom didn't last. 2 days later, Emma showed up at the workshop, unannounced. She looked thinner, her eyes red-rimmed, her hair a mess. "Dad," she said, stepping inside, her voice small. I set down my chisel, my chest tightening at that word, Dad. It used to mean everything. Now it just hurt. "What do you want, Emma?" I asked, keeping my tone even. She fidgeted, clutching her purse. I know things are bad between us. The wedding, everything. I messed up." I waited, arms crossed, not giving her an inch. She took a shaky breath. "Andrew and I got evicted. We're at his mom's now, but it's awful. I tried calling Mark. He promised to help, but he's gone again. I don't know what to do." I stared at her, the DNA test burning a hole in my pocket. Part of me wanted to throw it at her, watch her crumble when she saw the truth. But another part, the part that still remembered her at 5, chasing paper planes, just felt tired. "I'm sorry you're struggling," I said, slow and deliberate. "But I can't fix this for you. Not anymore." Her eyes widened, tears spilling over. "But you're my dad," she whispered, like it was a magic word that could undo everything. I stepped closer, my voice hard. "You made it clear I'm not, Emma. At the wedding, every time you ran to Mark, you chose. Live with it." She sobbed, reaching for me, but I turned away, picking up my chisel. "Go home," I said. She lingered a moment, then left, the door creaking shut behind her. Sarah called an hour later, furious. "She came back crying, David. How could you turn her away?" I gripped the phone, my patience gone. "Because I'm not her damn ATM, Sarah." She picked Mark. Let him save her. Sarah's voice shook. "You're heartless. I don't even know you anymore." "Good," I shot back. "Maybe you never did." I hung up, my hands trembling, and sank onto a stool. The workshop was quiet, just the hum of the fluorescent lights, but my head was loud, anger, guilt, relief all crashing together. Then Helen stormed in, because of course she did. "You bastard!" she shrieked, her face red, a finger jabbing at me. "My son's sleeping on a couch because of you. You owe them." I stood, towering over her, my voice low and dangerous. "I owe them nothing, Helen. Your boy married her. His mess, not mine." She glared, then spat on the floor. "You'll pay for this, Harper. I'll make sure everyone knows what you've done." She stomped out, and I kicked a chair across the room, the crash echoing in the empty space. I was done with all of them. Helen's exit left the workshop in a tense silence. the chair I'd kicked lying on its side like a casualty of war. My chest heaved, my knuckles white from clenching fists I didn't even realize I'd made. I stood there, the DNA test still in my pocket, its edges worn from how often I'd handled it since Lena gave it to me. It was a weapon I hadn't used yet, a truth I could wield to cut deeper than any punch I'd thrown at Mark. But as I picked up the chair, setting it upright with a shaky breath, I wondered if it was worth it anymore. Maybe Mike was right. Maybe this wasn't about proving anything to Emma or Sarah. Maybe it was about letting myself walk away. Sophie came by later, her presence a quiet balm to the storm still raging in me. She didn't say much, just set a cup of coffee on the workbench and started sketching in a notebook, her pencil scratching softly against the paper. I watched her for a while, the way her brow furrowed when she concentrated, and something in me settled. "You think I'm crazy?" I asked, breaking the silence. She looked up, her green eyes steady. "No," she said simply. "I think you're hurt, and I think you're done letting it define you." I nodded, taking a sip of the coffee, its warmth grounding me. "I don't know what's next," I admitted. She smiled, small but real. "You don't have to, just keep going." The next week was a blur of sawdust and solitude. I threw myself into a new project, a cedar chest for Mike's birthday, something solid to mark the time passing, but the world wouldn't let me be. Emma showed up again, this time with Andrew trailing behind her like a lost puppy. They stood in the doorway, her arms crossed, his hands stuffed in his pockets. "Dad," she started, her voice softer than before, almost fragile. I didn't look up from my work, the plane sliding over the wood in a steady rhythm. "What now, Emma?" I said, my tone flat. She stepped closer, her shoes scuffing the floor. "I know you're mad, I get it, but I need to tell you something." I stopped, setting the plane down and turned to face her. Her eyes were red, her face drawn, and Andrew looked like he hadn't slept in days. "Mark's gone," she said, her voice trembling. "Really gone this time. I called him, begged him to help us, and he just laughed, said he was done playing dad. Then Tony, he told me everything, about the DNA. My heart stuttered, my hand brushing the envelope in my pocket. "You know?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. She nodded, tears spilling over. "He's not my father, he never was. You were, Dad. I was so stupid, and I'm so sorry." I stared at her, the words I'd wanted to hear for months hanging between us. Part of me, the part that remembered her at 5, giggling as I pushed her on a swing, wanted to pull her into a hug, tell her it was okay. But the other part, the one still raw from the wedding, from every time she'd chosen Mark over me, wouldn't let me move. "Sorry doesn't fix it, Emma," I said, my voice low but firm. "You didn't just hurt me once. It was every time you acted like I wasn't enough." She sobbed, covering her face, and Andrew stepped forward, his voice desperate. "Please, David, we've got nothing left. Helen kicked us out. We're sleeping in the car." I looked at him, then back at her, and felt a cold clarity settle in. "I gave you everything I had for 20 years, I said, "and you threw it back in my face. I can't keep saving you." Emma's knees buckled, and she sank to the floor, crying harder, but I didn't budge. Andrew glared at me, his jaw tight. "You're a bastard," he muttered, helping her up. "You'll regret this." They left, her sobs fading into the distance, and I stood there alone again, my chest aching but lighter somehow. Sarah called that night, her voice a mix of fury and despair. "She told me what happened," she said. "She's broken, David. You've destroyed her." I leaned against the wall, staring at the cedar chest, its lines smooth and strong. "She destroyed me first, Sarah," I said. "I'm not her doormat anymore." She laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. "You're not her father either. You've lost us both." The line went dead, and I set the phone down, the finality of it sinking in. They were gone, Sarah, Emma, the family I'd built, but I wasn't empty. I was free. Mark's downfall came a week later, and it was sweeter than I'd imagined. Lena called me, her voice gleeful. "Turn on the news," she said. I did, and there he was, Mark Sullivan, handcuffed, being shoved into a police car. The headline flashed, "Local man arrested for fraud and theft." Turns out he'd been running scams with his casino buddies, the same ones who'd jumped me. Tony had ratted him out, tired of covering for him, and the cops had dug up years of dirt. Lena laughed over the phone. "Karma's a bitch, huh? He's looking at 10 years, minimum." I watched the screen, Mark's smug grin replaced by a scowl, and felt a grim satisfaction. He'd lost everything. Emma's trust, his freedom, his lies exposed. He'd rot, and I wouldn't lift a finger to help. Months passed, and I settled into a new rhythm. The workshop became my sanctuary, the cedar chest a symbol of something I could still build. Mike stopped by often, cracking jokes, keeping me sane. "You're better off, Dave," he'd say, and I started to believe him. Sophie moved in, her paintings brightening the small apartment I'd rented, her laugh filling the spaces Sarah and Emma had left. We didn't talk about the future much, just lived it day by day, and it was enough. One evening, as I sanded a new piece, a letter slipped under the door. Emma's handwriting, shaky and faint. I opened it, my heart thudding, and read, "Dad, I know I don't deserve forgiveness. Mark's in jail, Andrew left me, and I'm alone. I see now what you did for me, and I hate myself for what I did to you. I'll always love you, even if you can't love me back." I set it down, staring at the words, a dull ache in my chest. She was suffering, alone with the wreckage of her choices, and I couldn't deny the pang of pity. But I didn't write back. Not yet. Maybe not ever. She'd learned to stand on her own, or she wouldn't. That wasn't my burden anymore. I stepped outside, the night air cool against my skin, Sophie joining me with a beer in hand. "You okay?" she asked, leaning against me. I nodded, looking up at the stars. "Yeah," I said, and meant it. Mark was in chains, Emma was lost to her own mistakes, and I was here, alive, whole, unburdened. Life had taken everything I'd built and given me something else. Myself. It wasn't a neat ending, no grand reconciliation or bitter revenge. It was messy, open, real. I could keep going, see where this road led, and that was enough. Looking back, I learned something hard but true. Love isn't a debt you can collect, and family isn't just blood, it's the people who show up day after day. I gave mine everything, and they gave me scars, but those scars taught me to stand for myself. Mark's in a cell, Emma's paying her price, and I'm free to write my own story. What about you? What would you do if the people you love turned their backs? Would you fight, walk away, or find a new path? Drop your thoughts below. I'd love to hear. This mess of a life isn't over yet, and maybe your story's just beginning too.